New logo.
Okay, yeah, he said that, maybe someday that'll be,
Yeah, collector's item.
Over here.
It's due, Kathleen.
I know, what did I say? Here comes Brian.
Let's go. You ready? Who are we missing? No, I gotta wait 2 minutes. Scott.
Dr. Scott. Oh, there we go.
All right.
there he is.
It's not gonna be that.
How was your trip to Charlotte? Good, it was good? Excellent.
Yeah, not a bad
Let's
drive.
all put them on.
It's not a bad drive. We drove Friday and Saturday on the way down, and coming home, we came home on Thursday and drove straight through. 12 hours.
We raised a can that we felt like ugly stepchildren.
That's about mine.
Only Scott got the
Yeah,
pen.
it's not mine anymore.
I'm hit to that point.
That 18,
You drove out?
20
Thank you, Angie.
I can't do it.
You don't get a second one.
I didn't do it.
Oh, Mark.
I can go back.
I'm stealing it. You don't get a second one.
How could, from Dan.
Oh, Dan.
They're great, aren't they?
All right.
Duty was ready to be done with the mountains, because you can't make any time. Feel like you're
Just in
driving,
time for
driving, not going anywhere.
Yeah, you do, yeah. Well, you might use his.
So it was free.
No, stop.
Okay.
Very good. Other than, I just got my bag today at 4 from Saturday.
All right, yeah.
Yeah. Good thing I didn't need anything in that bag, except for my razor.
Pulling anything?
Yeah. And then they, mechanical, so I didn't actually make my claim, so they flew me to Peoria.
You need a vacation from your
Unfortunately, Kathleen and RC and Diana were
Brought my book with me just
in and
case
out
it
of Peoria, and they were in
I've
just a
seen
few
a
minutes before
thin
me,
crowd
so I
like
got a
this.
ride.
Wow.
Otherwise, I would have been stuck there.
Yeah.
University cleared out.
Missy driving over.
Yeah.
Picked me up.
Ready to go? Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for November 20th, 2017. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here.
Mr. Fritzen.
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Cummings.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've had no requests for public comment, so we'll move directly to the omnibus agenda, items that will be taken under one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused on voting in on any bills I may have incurred my duties as mayor.
Move approval.
Second. Actually, I'm sorry, Mayor, I'd like to pull item E. E's in Edward.
Thank you. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you.
My second.
I needed a second. Items considered on the omnibus agenda are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of November 6, 2017, and approval of town of normal expenditures for payment as of November 15, 2017. A resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement for the police shooting range facility with the city of Bloomington. A resolution approving a lease extension for the Ecology Action Center at 202 West College Avenue. And a resolution to approve a final plat for the re-subdivisions of lots 9 and 10 in the 7th addition to the Northland Commercial Subdivision. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved with the exception of item E, which was pulled by Mr. Preston, a resolution to approve a final plat for Lot 1 of re-subdivision of the Lot 7 in the 5th edition to the Northland Commercial Subdivision having to do with Menards.
Move approval.
Thank you. Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a quick question, kind of clarifying, as this is very close to where I used to live, and wondering for staff, does this typically signal that there will be a request for additional development by Menards, or do we kind of walk me through, I guess, why would this be happening?
We also had that question because it's nothing that the town is requiring. Apparently Menards corporate has some standard for the amount of property they would like around a facility like the warehouse they have behind Menards. They said it was something to do with fire code and whatever, which may be the case for them, but it's not the case for us. So it was legitimately just something that was prompted by their legal counsel, and they just needed to add on this sliver of land.
Okay.
So there's really nothing else they could do with it. It's not really enough land to do anything with, and there's an easement running, a drainage easement running through it, so that's it.
I'm just saying, we have had some conversations with Menards from time to time about reconfiguring that back storage lot area. But at this point, nothing specific has been suggested, but I don't think this change has anything to do with
It
that.
doesn't.
It's just their own internal standard.
Okay, thanks.
Further discussion on this item? Please call a roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, the resolution is approved. We have one item of general orders tonight, and that is an ordinance approving the Town of Normal 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
Move approval. Second.
Before we have discussion or questions, I think Mercy's got a short presentation for us tonight.
I do.
It's all yours.
Thanks for having me up here again. It was just a few weeks ago that we talked about the first part of the Comprehensive Plan 2040. You recall that was a joint session with the Planning Commission, and I was up here with a whole cast of characters who'd been working on that plan. Tonight, Vasu Penamaraju from Regional Planning Commission is unable to attend based on a last-minute family emergency situation, so she extended her apologies. So I'll be covering both the comp plan discussion and then also the regional housing plan, which is somewhat incorporated by reference into the town's comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll get started. It's a lot of material. I'm not going to go into great detail because I feel like we've really discussed this quite a bit over the last couple of years. A lot of working groups, stakeholders, all sorts of people involved from the public. This first slide just shows you again the process. You've seen this in previous presentations. Just to show you, we started with the community snapshot, worked through the visioning plan, pulled together some really high-level advisory groups, and came up with the final plan that's before you tonight. The Comprehensive Plan 2040 has two major sections. The first section is the elements, and the second section is the planning framework. The elements were actually the subject of the, I think it was October 16th work session. So there are these 7 categories that the working groups worked on for many months and came up with recommendations, kind of a status update on all these different subject areas. I'm not going to read through them, but I will point out that housing in the top left there, again, we'll be discussing that in more depth at the end of this presentation. So the elements, what came out of the elements really underpins the rest of the plan. It set a lot of the values and the goals and the overall vision for the comprehensive plan, and what we're doing now is turning that into the land use plan. And sometimes when people think of a comprehensive plan, all they think about is the land use plan. They just want to know, well, what land uses are you going to put where, and how fast are you going to spread out and grow? So what's different this time is that we're really refocusing more on the interior of the community that's already been annexed. We have plenty of land to work with, and what we're working towards in this plan is the goal of being complete, connected, and compact. And complete really refers to 3 major components. We want neighborhoods, we want centers or destinations, and we want good corridors that connect all that stuff. And within our neighborhoods, we want a variety of price points, a variety of styles, houses that work for everybody, whatever age, whatever ability you are. We want centers that are attractive destinations, whether it's an employment center, a park, any other sort of institution, industrial areas. And then we want our corridors to be very welcoming and inviting, safe and convenient for people to get to where they need to go, which is the connected part of all this. Although connected isn't just the way you physically move about the community, it's also, we want to be socially connected. We want to be technologically connected. That's ever more important. As you know, in this economy, we need strong technological connections. And finally, compact, just as the word suggests, we need to be a little denser, a greater mixture of uses so that people can have, again, safe and convenient access to all sorts of things they need in their daily lives, whether that's getting to their job, getting to school, getting to a park, living in a way that's pretty healthy. It also makes for a much more fiscally and environmentally sustainable system because it's just much more efficient to provide services to a smaller geographic area. A little development snapshot here. You can see the dark, well, it's kind of a Pepto-Bismol pink there, is the 1970 boundaries. We experienced quite a bit of growth between 1970 and 2015. 2015 is shown with the dark red outline. Over that period of time, the population in Normal increased by 2 times, and the amount of land we annexed increased by more than 2.5 times. And that's a pretty big difference. And I think what you see outside of the 1970 boundaries, the type of development has been even more auto-oriented. The neighborhoods are more spread out. They're a little more difficult to get from one neighborhood to another because there are more major highways between, separating them from the rest of the community. And so you can see the difference if you drive around in the 1970 part of town, and then after that, it's a more conventional suburban style of development. Which brings us to one of the 2 most important maps in the plan. This is the planning framework. This is where we look at what the land uses are today and think about what we want them to be in the future and give them a color. So these are separated into the 3 major categories of neighborhoods, centers, and corridors. The neighborhoods are divided by age for the most part, and centers are divided by the size of the center and how big of a region it serves. So you could either have a local center that just serves Normal, Bloomington, or you could have a regional center like the hospital or the university that are serve a regional population. This is in contrast to previous comprehensive plan, land use plan maps, in that we really segregated the uses more significantly in previous plans. We really called out, here's where we want high density residential, here's where we want medium density, here's where we want low density, here's exactly where we want a neighborhood center or an industrial park. This really suggests a broader thinking about all of these geographies. So within a residential area, we're looking for a mixture of residential types, and within centers, there's a mixture of uses that would be appropriate. So it's a bit more flexible than previous plans, and I think that'll be really helpful going into the future. You have to read that map along with the growth priority map. So this shows where we are looking for development to happen first. It's divided into tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 are the areas in the community that should develop first because all the services are there and they're surrounded by services, they're in convenient locations. I know the colors get a little wonky on a screen, but the tealish green and then the darkest color up there, those are tier 1. And there's quite a bit of land right there that's, has services ready to go. Tier 2 requires some sort of more significant infrastructure investment, typically by the developer. And tier 3 is out on the east side. That's where we're lacking some serious public infrastructure. It would take a really, really significant investment to make that. In that case, sewer is a big issue. So these maps need to be read in conjunction. What kinds of land uses do we want and when do we want them to happen in certain locations? This map just highlights a few of the neighborhoods we have that are not fully developed yet. And we've talked about this previously, but in these dark blue areas and in the kind of pinkish areas, we have about 3,600 residential units that have been approved on paper but not yet built. There's also the Uptown 2.0 plan that suggests a potential demand for up to 1,000 units of housing near Uptown. Now, if all that were to happen, 4,600 residential units were to be built, we anticipate that would fulfill all of the development that we would need by 2040, all the residential development we need based on current population projections. Of course, anything can change, and the plan is flexible and can change with it. But this is just to show you where we have agreements that are out there where we already know that there's residential on paper. The plan, of course, includes tons of recommendations. What should we do in these different parts of the community? In the older neighborhoods, which, by the way, the older neighborhoods are the closest to being complete, connected, and compact, just based on where they were built and when. So in those neighborhoods, we're looking to preserve the housing. It doesn't mean they're all supposed to be historic districts, but these are good, solid, affordable houses. Maintain the infrastructure. If there is redevelopment or infill, making sure it's context sensitive. For the newer neighborhoods, we're looking to keep it in the tier 1 areas, not spreading out beyond that, making sure that as we have opportunities to make these developments more in line with our 3C goal, that we do that. We want to be looking at more diverse housing types, more affordable housing, and really specific things like working with Unit 5 on any future school sites. That could be really helpful in how we grow as a community. There's a portion of the plan that's also dedicated to talking about the influence of the university on the neighborhoods around it. We've never really specifically talked about this in a comprehensive plan, but we've certainly acknowledged it through our practices with the Neighborhood Action Team and other initiatives like that. Within the university influence neighborhood, we know that this is a really special part of our town, and we need to pay more attention to the public realm. What do our gateways look like? How are we offering multimodal transportation? Things that matter in that part of town. And within that zone, we have two even more specific areas, the influence zone at number 1 and number 2. UIN number 1 is where the students live. It is the area that is the closest to the campus of Illinois State. And it's dense housing, a lot of the new stuff is very attractive, and we want it to be that way. We want to support dense development. We want to make sure transit is really well used. We want to make sure people have pedestrian and bicycle opportunities. In UIN 2, those are the neighborhoods that are a little sensitive because they're right around the student housing. And a lot of those houses are really affordable and nice and single family in character. And there's always going to be a little tension there because there's students living right across the street sometimes. So we want to be sure that we work with those folks as well. The centers that we've described, again, they're kind of based on the size and who they serve. There are recommendations for each one. There's a map that just kind of lays out which centers are where in the community. The recommendations basically look to improve what we have, and where there's infill development on the horizon, making sure it comes into line with the compact and connected and complete. We may actually look at doing some sub-area plans for special areas. For example, One Normal Plaza might be a perfect spot to really dive in a little deeper and make a plan for that. But it's all about reinvigorating what we have, making them denser, making them, giving them more diverse uses to keep them really healthy. The corridors, we have transportation corridors, cultural corridors, and natural corridors. Transportation, people generally get that. It's our streets, it's the railroad even. But we want to focus on some transit-oriented development, maybe some trail-oriented development. Look at our complete streets policy, which you've already adopted, and continue to implement it, maybe codify parts of it. Use more green infrastructure. There's a lot of recommendations coming out about all the corridors in this plan. There's also a table, I guess this is a table, of different types of uses and what parts of the community they'd be appropriate in or inappropriate in. So you could run through this, and let's say there's a proposal for some high-density residential. You could see that it is permitted in the old neighborhoods and early suburban neighborhoods, but only as context-sensitive design. So you'd want to be really careful if you're going to put high-density housing in one of these older neighborhoods. In some instances, the chart might actually say it's completely discouraged. So this is the kind of chart we'll look to over time and just compare proposed land uses with what the comp plan recommends. There are ways to measure our success with the comp plan. We're actually Regional Planning has recommended an annual report format that we could do internally just to see how we're implementing the comp plan. There are more than 30 metrics in the plan that are very specific to things like how walkable is a neighborhood, how transit friendly is it, what kind of housing type diversity do you have. I don't know where they found all these formulas, but they did. And so we can actually measure with some real numbers. And of course, we'll want to set some targets as well. As far as implementation goes, it's an enormous plan. It's not going to get implemented all at once or quickly. So the first step will be prioritizing, figuring out what it is that's the most important to us, and then aligning our regulations and incentives to meet the goals. I mean, it would be no surprise, I'm sure, that some parts of our zoning code right now aren't really in line with some of what we're saying in the comp plan. A lot of it is, but there's going to have to be some changes. We also, in implementation, need to measure our progress and look for opportunities to collaborate. There are some things in the plan that are not doable with the town alone. We would need our partners at the table. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that are excited. They're ready to go. So we need to take advantage of that. So there's a lot to be done. It's a great document. We've had a lot of public input early on, like in the beginning of the 2 years, and then we've had a lot of focus group meetings and stakeholder interviews. But frankly, outside of the really, us getting input from people, going out and getting it, we haven't heard a lot from people. There was a little blip of activity when the first news story came out and said that we were proposing to eliminate all parking, which was not true. That got some interest. But after that, it's been, I'm going to say, mostly positive, just not a lot, just not a lot of quantity. So it's been good. The BN Home Regional Housing Study, I'm just going to touch on the biggest points out of that. I don't know if you've had a chance to see this document, but it is loaded with numbers, percentages, charts, graphs. It's really good information. It's the first time we've ever done a comprehensive regional housing study in this community. It was run by Regional Planning Commission, and the steering committee was really interesting. I mean, there were realtors and developers and banks and school district people and all the agencies you would suspect, PATH and Habitat and Bloomington Housing Authority. This went on for about 11 months, and the point was to analyze what we have by way of housing right now and what do they project we're going to need and where's the alignment problem. They did a demographic analysis, and of course, seeing that the population is not growing at the rate it did in previous years, they did note that the greatest growth in new jobs here seems to be in IT and biotech and biomed through the hospitals and the university. And with that group of people, that's a higher salary base and people who are looking for different kinds of housing as well. So it was kind of good to put a finger on that. They looked at a lot of the numbers on housing construction, and it's probably not a surprise to you, but we are overbuilt right now. There are quite a few vacant units, and new starts are way down. As far as income goes, we're generally a well-to-do community compared to comparable areas across the region, but we do have a growing number of people living in poverty. So and that's not uncommon. And then, of course, they looked at affordability and special needs. The key findings are that there is this reduced demand for single-family and multifamily housing, generally that we're a bit overbuilt. Also, that there's a mismatch between what's been built in the last few years and the household size. So household size continues to edge down a little bit, and yet the size of the new homes that are being built are still 3 and more bedrooms for the most part. So that seems to be a mismatch. We are actually relatively affordable when you look at comparable communities, but there's always the affordability issue for people on the lower end of the income spectrum, so that is a real problem for people. But in general, for everyone else, it's a fairly affordable place to live. The issue for the homeless is just complicated, and there is one, and there just aren't a lot of options. And the homeless population changes so much, it's hard to keep track of that, and that's not something I've been closely involved in. And finally, they found that there are limited options for people between 18 and 64 who have disabilities. And it's hard to measure what the problem is because so many of those folks are taken care of by friends and family, kind of outside of the system. But I can tell you, I've gotten more calls about it over the course of the time I've been here, where people call and they're trying to figure out some sort of housing arrangement for their adult child who can't be totally independent, but also doesn't want to live in the bedroom he grew up in. So it's a very interesting dilemma that people are really thinking about. So it was a very helpful exercise to go through the housing study. A lot of people, I think, were pretty energized by it. It seems like it's been just relegated to a handful of people or a handful of groups that worry about these things, Bloomington Housing and McLean County or Mid-Central Community Action. So really bringing all these people together was pretty fun and very interesting. So that's what I have. There's a lot of information, so I don't know what you want to do next. You can ask questions, you can talk.
Questions? I guess not.
Mr. Mayor, let me just add, this has been a long, long process involving lots of staff. Mercy's sort of course, been the lead staff on our side, and it's too bad Vasu could not be here tonight. I know she wanted to be. She had this, as Mercy indicated, a family emergency. No matter what happens tonight, though, we're going to tell her it's a 4-3 vote.
Nail biter.
But lots of community impact, lots of people involved, thousands of people got involved in one way or the other, and I think that's something we should be very proud of, and I think their input is clearly reflected in the document. So this is something that certainly the tiny little role that I played in it, I'm very proud of it, and I know our staff is as well. I think this is an award-winning plan. We'll be submitting this for various planning award programs, and I think it will, my sense it will get really, really positive consideration. But it's a document that will change our community for the better, and we are dedicated at the staff level to keep this as a very working document, keep in front of us. As Mercy said, there are metrics in there to manage how we are doing and how we're performing. So we won't be able to hide from those metrics if we are not performing, and I believe that we will. And it's a plan that is designed in such a way that it's fairly, I wouldn't say easy to implement, but it's easy to keep in front of us all the time. And hopefully this will connect nicely with the council strategic plan that you're working on for the coming year and future strategic plans. But it will serve us well. It was, 9-10 years since we did this, husband, and that was an update. This is such a change from what we've done in the past, a dramatic change. And again, I want to credit Regional Planning Commission for their tremendous effort here. Vasu and her whole staff just were tremendous. They did a great job, and we're real proud of it. Thank you.
Yep. Any further questions? Mr. McCarthy?
I just want to say thank you to all the staff that participated in this. I was fortunate to get to take part in a couple different pieces of this, and I'm always amazed how a bunch of conversation in a room somehow gets distilled down into something decipherable and recordable in a document. But I guess I want to follow up a little bit on what Mr. Peterson said is the third planning effort I've been involved in with the town, and I was very impressed to see and encouraged to see the hard metrics being focused on out of this plan, and I think certainly not all of our objectives can be put down to a formula and tracked in that kind of a way, but the focus to that for holding ourselves accountable, both certainly staff, but certainly us here on the dais, of getting behind this comprehensive plan and giving you guys direction and budget dollars to be able to execute on all this stuff and keeping us focused down the road, I think is a really great opportunity for the entire community. So thanks.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
All right.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. We have one item of new business tonight, and that is a motion to approve an appointment to the Asayakawa Sister Cities Committee and a reappointment to the McLean County Regional Planning Commission.
Move approval.
Thank you. As this is a matter of personnel, there will be no discussion unless a council member would like to take this to executive session. And seeing no such request, please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The appointments are approved. Mr. Fritzen, if you would read those.
Sure. The first one is a reappointment of Mary Jefferson to a 3-year term on the McLean County Regional Planning Commission. Her current term expires at the end of this year, and her new term will expire 3 years from December 31st in 2020. She was first appointed to the Regional Planning Commission in 2007, so rather lengthy bit of service and probably deeply involved in some of what we just talked about. So appreciate that. Also, the appointment of Mr. Jeffrey Kresh. Is it Kresh? That's how I would pronounce it, to the Asayakawa Sister Cities Committee. Mr. Kresh is a graduate of Illinois State, employed with District 87, where he teaches language arts to 8th graders. Former exchange student himself, Mr. Kresh looks forward to providing exciting learning opportunities for young people through the Sister Cities program. He'd be described as an active volunteer with the program and their Junior Ambassador project. So we welcome him to the Asayakawa Sister Cities Committee.
Thank you. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there comments or concerns? Ms. Cummings?
I just wanted to say happy holidays to everyone. As we know, we're coming upon the Thanksgiving holiday. And just want to say thank you to the community for continuing to support us, and especially when we're in a season of Thanksgiving. So,
Thank you.
Very good.
Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Got pretty rough up here somewhere. Looks like a piece of glass or something. It's got crazy. Look, it wasn't us throwing glasses at each other. No, I'm quite sure. I've heard like some places brawls happen. I know. I'm like, well, this is in one piece, so I don't know what this is. It could be plastic. I don't know. Try plastic. Weird. Have a nice Thanksgiving. Are you traveling? We're moving Quincy.